Throughout the past couple of years now, the Eastern Conference has gotten significantly better, and especially at the top. You got teams like Boston winning the NBA Finals last season, and not to mention the amount of talent they have on their team. New York trading for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns, Milwaukee trading for Damian Lillard last season, Cleveland making a trade for Donovan Mitchell a couple of years ago, and now Philadelphia signing Paul George, and not to mention adding a ton of depth to their team. And with that being said, why is Philadelphia not being talked about like they have been? Now I know Boston is coming off an NBA Finals run and winning the NBA Finals themselves. New York appears to be a heavy favorite after Boston, but let's not forget about the Philadelphia 76ers. They're definitely a loaded team, both with top-end talent and with good depth, and we're going to talk about what they did both from an addition standpoint and for what they lost in their team too, which in my opinion is definitely trending in the right direction. After all, they made a big-time addition with Paul George, a 9-time All-Star, and a guy that is still in the prime of his NBA career. And then again, they had an even more depth to their already fairly deep team, and not to mention going 47-35 last season, even with Joel Embiid only playing 39 total games. Believe it or not, they only finished 3 games back of the 2nd seed, and that's with Joel Embiid missing 53 total games. Now imagine what they could do with a healthy Joel Embiid, and not to mention Tyrese Maxey and Paul George with him. That could be pretty dangerous. And with that being said, we're going to break down what their ceiling might be, or just about their outlook this season. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. And beginning with where they ranked last season to see where they can maybe improve or where they maybe might decline a little bit. And to begin, they rank 14th in offensive rating, were well below average in both field goal percentage, ranking 23rd, and 3-point percentage too, ranking 18th. But then for defense, they ranked 11th, and that's not too bad when you consider missing Embiid for about 53 games. Ultimately their last line of defense and a pretty good rim protector at that, so not too bad in regard to 11th, but I think there is room for improvement here as well. And with the only notable defenders they let go being DeAnthony Melton and Nick Batum, I think they have a lot to improve upon. And then for rebounds, as we cannot forget about rebounding, they did rank 20th. And here's where I think they actually might have the most room to improve, or maybe are the most guaranteed to improve. Not only with a healthy Joel Embiid, but not to mention Andre Drummond too, one of the best rebounders in NBA history. And no, I'm not joking about that either. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but what big additions and subtractions do they make that will affect their team? And beginning with who they lost in their team, I think we gotta start with Tobias Harris, a guy that has been with their team for about the past half decade, and not to mention having a max contract as well. It finally came to an end and they did let him walk in free agency, where he went back to the Detroit Pistons. And although Tobias was not as bad as many made him out to be, he definitely did not live up to that contract, and I think they definitely upgraded from him too. Obviously with Paul George, but even with their other additions as well. But they will be losing about 15 to 17 points per game with Tobias Harris, a fairly good 3-point shooter, shot about 37.3% with their team for the past half decade, and a fairly good rebounding wing as well. Can play both at power forward and small forward during some matchups, so a little bit of versatility lost there, not a terrible defender, and an overall fairly versatile player as well. But again, probably not worth that contract. After him though, they did lose a very good 3-point shooter, with that being Buddy Hield, one of the best in the entire league, and he did shoot about 39% from 3 on nearly 7 attempts per game with their team last season, averaging over 12 points per game and about 25 minutes per game while doing it, and all around being an offensive spark for their team off the bench. However, as we all know, he was not very good on defense, neither with their team nor before that either. Not an outright liability during certain matchups, but not a guy you can really trust during the late 4th quarter, and especially not come playoff time. That led to him playing only 12.8 minutes per game during their team's brief playoff run, and that ultimately led to them moving on from him. Apart from Hield and Tobias Harris though, they did let a few other guys go too. And one of my favorites, or maybe biggest loss for them, had to be DeAnthony Melton. A really good 3-and-D guard for their team, and definitely a good fit with their team, and probably any team at that. Unfortunately, he did deal with injuries last season, only playing in about 38 games for their team, but was an underrated loss for their team if you ask me. Great 3-and-D guard to pair with Tyrese Maxey, took on the tougher matchup on the court, and was really a pest on defense too. Both in one-on-one defense, but really got in passing lanes well, averaged about 2 steals per game and only about 25 minutes per game, so definitely a guy that can cause takeaways and directly add points to your team on the other end of the court. And overall, I think it will be relatively difficult to replace De'Anthony Melton, but they might be able to do it. After him though, they did lose Nick Batum, and albeit a 35-year-old, still a good defender, a great team player, an overall good fit for their team and probably any team too. Definitely a 3-and-D wing, being fairly switchable even now at 35 years old, can defend probably 2 through 4 in the regular matchup, and can knock down 3-point shots at a really good rate too. He shot 40% from 3 after joining their team last season, and hit some big fourth quarter shots while doing it. Now, they did lose a few other guys like Robert Covington, but I think the 4 of De'Anthony Melton, Nick Batum, Buddy Hield, and Tobias Harris were their primary losses of their team. And with that being said, who did they add to make up for them? And beginning with their biggest addition, obviously being Paul George, that was their biggest addition of the offseason and one of the biggest around the entire league. Again, a 9-time All-Star that is coming off yet another great season, averaging about 23 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 3.5 assists per game, 1.5 steals per game, and shot a new career high 41.3% from 3, and not to mention taking about 7 of them per game while doing it. I mean, if you're talking about a star player that can fit with literally anybody, and on pretty much any team, then Paul George would have to be the guy that you talk about the most. He has not only done it for 3 or 4 different teams at this point, but has fit with pretty much any superstar, whether it be Russell Westbrook, a guy that tended to have trouble being paired with a different star, to a guy like Kawhi Leonard, or even back in Indiana with other role players like David West, Roy Hibbert. Paul George has been paired with and played with an abundance of NBA players and different talents too. So that's definitely a good outlook for their team. He can fill a bunch of different roles for their team, whether that be that first or second scoring option depending on their matchup or who's available for their team, or even being that catch and shoot guy for their team, off-ball cutter, good defender, and overall team player that really never complains about his role. So in my opinion, one of the best additions by any team over the summer, and a really good fit for their team overall. Even at this point at about 35, he remains a great defender, so he can be regarded as a two-way player as well. Won't be a liability on defense, obviously a great addition for their offense, and overall a really good fit for their team again. Moving on though, it was not only Paul George for their team, as they did add a few other players too. One of them being Caleb Martin from the Miami Heat. Yet another 3-and-D wing addition for their team, and really making up for the loss of both De'Anthony Melton and Nick Batum in my opinion. Caleb Martin will add another layer to their defense, and he might be the primary wing defender within their starting lineup. They probably don't want Paul George filling that role on an every game basis, so probably a guy like Caleb Martin or maybe somebody else they picked up. But I think Caleb Martin probably would be the favorite to do it. Proven defender that can take on difficult matchups and even win them at times too. Comfortable in both a switch defense, a man-to-man defense, or even a zone defense too. Pretty much the Miami Heat's specialty. And even apart from offense or defense, Caleb Martin tends to get better come playoff time. During the past 2 seasons, his numbers have gotten significantly better during the playoffs compared to the regular season. Whether you're talking about points per game, 3-point percentage, rebounds, or pretty much anything, he gets better during the big moments. Moving on though, I referenced him before, but they did pick up Andre Drummond, one of the best rebounders in NBA history and definitely one of the best in the current NBA, if not the best. And that will automatically fix the rebounding problem from last season. I imagine they'll go from ranking 20th all the way up to being a top 5 to 10 team on rebounds right away. It won't take long, and Andre Drummond is pretty much the exact fix they needed for that. Whether it be total rebounds per game, offensive rebounds per game, defensive rebounds per game, it won't matter. Drummond is that good on rebounding, and he barely even has to play to make an impact. He didn't even play over 20 minutes per game last season, and still grabbed nearly 10 of them per game, or about 19 per 36-minute average. So again, truly insane what he can do in regard to rebounding, and that will automatically help out their team. And not to mention him having played with both Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey before too, playing with their team during the 2021-22 NBA season. Moving on though, they did pick up KJ Martin, yet another athletic wing player for their team and maybe a 3-and-D wing. Probably not quite yet, but only 23 years old and does have potential. He did have a couple of years where he shot over 35% from 3, while taking about 2 to 3 of them per game. So not bad, could be better, but he does have to get back to doing that. Whether it be catch and shooting, corner 3-point shooting, pull-up shooting, whatever it might be, he will have to be a fairly efficient 3-point shooter to have a role within the rotation. But if we're talking about being a great athlete, he definitely has that covered. Truly an electric athlete in the open court, great lob threat, definitely can throw down a poster here and there, and should be fun to watch from that alone. Hopefully he can translate that to good defense, and he does need to lock in while doing it. Obviously has the talent, athletic ability, and overall motor to be a good defender, but he's got to be a bit more committed. After KJ Martin though, they did draft a player, with that being Jared McCain, and although he might be known more for painting his nails, kind of different for an NBA player, he definitely does have talent. Whether it be playmaking talent, shooting talent, scoring talent, or even some defensive talent too, Jared McCain could be their long-term solution at point guard, or maybe at combo guard to pair with Tyrese Maxey, and overall I do like the long-term outlook for him within their team. And he definitely does have two great veteran point guards to learn from, both from Kyle Lowry, who they picked up after the trade deadline last season, or from Reggie Jackson, a guy they picked up during free agency. Might be a bit past his prime at this point, but still a really good overall point guard, combo guard that can put up about 10 points per game when needed. And between the two of Jackson and Lowry, they have two reliable options at point guard and two really good additions for them to come off their bench. Apart from them though, another underrated addition they made, or at least in my opinion, happened to be Guerschon Yabusele, a guy that came over from France, and he really showed out while playing for the France team during the Olympics, averaging about 14 points per game during Olympic play, and all around showing out, whether it be 3-point shooting, throwing down a monstrous poster dunk on LeBron himself, or simply making an impact for their team, making it all the way to the gold medal game and probably being their second best player after Victor Wembanyama. Definitely deserve another shot in the NBA, and I'm glad a team gave it to him, and I think it'll pay off for Philly. With that being said though, that pretty much does it for their new additions. They did pick up Adam Bona in the second round of the NBA draft, but probably won't play that much, and I think the main additions for them obviously were Paul George, and then after him being Caleb Martin, KJ Martin, Andre Drummond, Jared McCain, and then Reggie Jackson and Guerschon Yabusele. And if you ask me, they're looking to improve in pretty much every facet. Whether it be offense, I think they're guaranteed to be better than 14th. They'll probably be a good bet to climb within the top 10, if not the top 8 with offensive rating. With a healthy Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey taking another step, and then again the perfect fit of Paul George, they're pretty much guaranteed to do it. And then on defense, while 11th was not bad for them like I mentioned before, I think they do have the ability to be a top 10 defense, probably around that 6th to 8th ranking, but even that would be improvement, and I think they do have the ability to do it. And then on rebounding, they'll be pretty much guaranteed to improve here from Andre Drummond alone. Obviously a great rebounder, a healthy Joel Embiid will help them out too, and all around being a better team defense and team rebounding team than they were last season. So in my opinion, no matter where you look, Philadelphia got better, both from a fit standpoint, a talent standpoint, and hopefully a chemistry standpoint too. But we will have to wait to see how that one turns out. And with that in mind, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the Philadelphia 76ers entering next season? And where do you think they improve the most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one. And if you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to drop a like, hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.